Episode 1 of Euphoria Season 2 starts this long-awaited second series in a very different direction. A cold bit of narration turns the attention across to Fezco, and in particular his grandmother. She shoots a club owner in both his thighs, barely blinking, while he sits with his penis out, screaming. With a young Fezco in the back of her car, this blonde-haired guardian isn't exactly a great role model, but teaches Fezco everything he needs to know about drug dealing. With his grandmother absent, at least emotionally, Fezco is left to deal with his new brother, Ashtray. No matter how unconventional the setup is, though, for them they're a family. At least to begin with. When his grandmother dies, Fezco is left to deal with the whole family business and simultaneously looking after Ashtray too, who he regards as a blood brother. One of their customers happens to be Rue, who we see in the backseat rapping while very clearly high. We're back in the present, on New Year's to be precise, as Ashtray and Fezco are angsty as they head to a deal. Imploring Rue to stay in the car with a girl called Faye, she starts taking heroin. The girls are immediately grabbed and taken inside, where they meet hot-headed Bruce, the man in charge. Paranoid, he demands everyone strip off to show they don't have a wire on them. While Rue is initially hesitant, Bruce throws her in the shower and demands she strip. Fezco eventually vouches for Rue's integrity. She may FCK around, but she's not an addict. He says. Once the deal goes down, and the trio head back in their car, Fezco calls out Rue's nonchalance and laughter, reminding her that this is serious business. Meanwhile, big drama ensues at the New Year's Eve party. Cassie goes rogue and heads off to the shop alone, leaving Maddie to scramble around trying to find her. She's not picking up her phone either, and part of that comes down to Nate. He chats up Cassie outside and offers her a ride. Drinking while driving, Nate begins plowing down the road at breakneck speed, reaching over 100 miles per hour. When they eventually arrive at the party, Cassie and Nate end up kissing, getting hot and heavy in the bathroom. The thing is, Maddie shows at the door, pounding and asking to be let in. Cassie eventually hides in the bath, hand on her mouth while the shower curtain is drawn. Elsewhere, Fezco starts talking to Lexi, commenting how he likes her name. The pair start to grow closer together, discussing their own views on religion and life. They're obviously very different people, but it's a really nice moment that shows a bit of vulnerability from Fezco, especially when his ideals are challenged. Fezco eventually admits that talking to her is the highlight of his whole year, managing to get her phone number in the process. Rue circles the periphery of the party, continuing to take drugs and fly off the deep end. Jules begins to worry, trying to find Rue, who keeps taking drugs. Back in the bathroom, Cassie is saved by her phone buzzing. Maddie leaves the bathroom with a sleazy partygoer trying to hook up with her, giving Cassie a window of opportunity to leave, despite another partygoer arriving and using the toilet. The time comes for Fezco and Ashtray to get to work, and they ask Rue to join them. With a minute until midnight, Jules learns that Rue relapsed the night she left, and she's devastated. As the lights pulsate, Rue opens up to Jules and apologizes for being mean initially. Rue has been having a rough time of it, but it's nothing compared to what's happening with Fezco and Nate. As the crowd cheer in New Year, Fezco beats Nate down to a pulp, smashing a glass over his head and pummeling his face. Given his promise to kill him next time they meet, that promise is almost carried out, only stopped by others pulling him off. Lexi can only watch in horror as Nate is dragged out. Episode 2 of Euphoria Season 2 begins right after Nate's brutal beating at the hands of Fezco. With blood staining his face, Nate is rushed to hospital as he questions his conflicting feelings toward the two women in his life. On the one hand, there's Maddie. His high school sweetheart. Maddie has always been there for him, but brought out the worst side of his persona. On the other hand, there's Cassie. During his delirious state, Nate flirts with the idea of love and sees himself spending his whole life with her. In doing so, this would also break the family cycle of messing up relationships. Nate snaps out of his fantasy though when he remembers that Maddie is in possession of the disc. Still, that doesn't stop him from letting his mind wander back to Cassie. The first day of the school year begins right after New Year as Rue reconnects with Jules. Everything is fine until Rue notices Elliot, the boy from the party whom she did drugs with. That's a problem, given he could destroy their relationship if he knew that Elliot and Rue have been spending time together, doing drugs. Jules can hardly contain her disappointment, believing Rue has a crush on him. She takes off to the bathroom, trying to hold back her tears. Meanwhile, a love triangle brews. Cassie and Nate's hookup plays on the former's mind, feeling guilty that Maddie and Nate are sorted together and jealous over Nate's nice messages he's sending to Maddie. The thing is, if Maddie found out the truth about Cassie, she would probably kill her or at least beat her to an absolute pulp anyway. This problem is only exacerbated that night when Nate's dad confronts Cassie and threatens to phone the police unless she reveals what happened to Nate. She caves, knowing her own message to Nate that night about them having sex could well be leaked if the police are involved. So naturally, she reveals that Fezco was responsible for the beating. Nate heads out with Cassie, and the pair drive together in secret, with Maddie struggling to get through to either of them. They arrive at a secluded area, where Nate tells her that what happened was a mistake and never should have happened. They can't see each other anymore or speak about what happened, that is, until he follows her, and the pair kiss again. Elsewhere, Kat and Ethan's relationship is facing problems, away from the facade of perfectness they've presented to the school. Kat wants more spontaneous lovemaking sessions, typified by her fantasy about a big rugged man having his way with her. These problems start to manifest themselves as Kat suffers from depression and struggles to make sense of what she really wants. That night, Jules, Maddie, and Kat all head out bowling together. While Maddie and Jules marvel at the perfect relationship Kat and Ethan have, unaware of Kat's woes, Maddie reveals that she's going to get back with Nate. Meanwhile, Fezco and Ashtray have an unwanted house guest. Faye. After evading the police following her pushing the motel manager off the roof, she's now living with him. The trouble is, this causes friction between him and Lexi, who shows up at Fezco's shop and sees the pair together. She immediately believes they're a couple and can hardly contain her disappointment. Nate's dad arrives in the shop, hand in pocket, and begins questioning Fezco. It's certainly an unnerving moment, as Ashtray fishes out the gun from a cereal box. Instead of brandishing a gun, though, he pays for his goods and tells Fezco that he's a concerned father and leaves. While Fezco is paranoid that Nate's dad is going to come after them, back home Nate tells his dad exactly why Fezco beat him. When he asks whether Nate has the tape or not, he's silent, debating over whether to reveal the truth or not. Episode 3 of Euphoria Season 2 starts with a look at Cal Jacobs and his relationship with best friend Eric. It's very clear that these best friends have more on their minds. Despite his affection for Derek, Cal ends up hooking up with a girl called Marcia. Derek also gets a girl of his own, leading to the four getting along like a house on fire. The thing is, the relationship these two have together is palpable, and as they head out together to a bar one night, their dancing beautifully paves way for hugging and a kiss. These feelings have clearly been festering for a while, and Cal struggles to hold back tears as they embrace. The lyrics to the song in the background "They Can Never Tear Us Apart" is bittersweet, as we know that's exactly what happens. That tearing comes from Cal finding out Marcia is pregnant. And that news tears his heart to pieces as he hangs up and starts crying. Back in the present, we open our timeline with Rue dancing about her room in the house. Gia is actually sitting on her laptop in the living room and sees her. Realizing she's high, Gia calls her out for it, and the pair inevitably fight. The thing is, this is all a ruse, you might say. Sorry, I'll see myself out, as we see her spinning the drug taking into something that helps with her anxiety. Specifically that she's kicking her harder drugs by relying solely on weed. It's enough to convince Gia, and everyone else at school too, that this is what's going on with her. Jules, though, continues to suspect Elliot has more than friendship on his mind. Through an interrogation complete with shining lamp and pressing questions, Jules seems to come around a little, believing he genuinely does want to be friends. Meanwhile, we see a bit more about Lexi's backstory too. The reason she froze during the Fezco and Cal situation is that she's an observer and has been all her life. In order to get her feelings down, she's taken to writing. Another character that's observing here is Cassie, who puts a lot of effort into getting ready for school every day. With the 4 a.m. alarms, she tries her best to grab Nate's attention. Well, she eventually does, but only because she's wearing the same outfit as Maddie. The next day, Lexi's writing manifests itself into a play of Oklahoma, which everyone believes Cassie is auditioning for, given her outfit. There's a beautifully written bouncy bit of a dialogue here, as all our main characters join together in the girls' bathroom and begin questioning Cassie. She eventually snaps, admitting she's in love with Nate Jacobs, but that's not what she actually says. Instead, this little scene plays out in her head and she stays quiet, staring right on ahead. The dynamic between Cassie and Maddie continues to simmer though, with the former playing the best friend and Nate's secret lover. Yes, Cassie has been sleeping with him for the last 3 weeks over at Nate's place. Nate, however, is haunted by the disc. This is a big part of his motivation, of course, and he decides to try and get it back from Fezco. Now, unbeknownst to him but obvious to ourselves as the audience, Fezco doesn't have the disc. Still, Nate arrives and receives a shotgun held up to his face for his troubles. Ashtray brings him inside and after repeated bashes across the forehead, covering Nate's dad in a pool of blood, Fezco reveals more of what's actually going on. He doesn't know about the disc, nor does Fezco know about Jules sleeping with Nate and it being recorded. After admitting he's not involved, Nate walks away, safe in the knowledge that Fezco is telling the truth. He also holds another bit of leverage against him given the Jules situation. Nate promises not to let Nate mess about with Fezco, Jules or Rue in the future. Stumbling out the front door, he heads home. Meanwhile, Rue strikes a deal with that dealer we saw on New Year's, Lori. She decides to start selling drugs for her, showing up with a jacket and a big pitch, as if it's a proper interview. Rue intends to sell drugs on a big scale at school, but that also comes with its own disadvantages, despite mentioning 3 girls who can help her. If Rue messes this up, Lori promises to kidnap her and worse. No pressure then? As the episode closes out, Nate collects up a bouquet of flowers and prepares to meet Cassie for their usual weekly booty call. Only he doesn't show. Instead, he messages Cassie to tell her something has come up and appears at Maddie's door while she's babysitting. Episode 4 of Euphoria Season 2 begins with Rue reflecting on how much she loves Jules. Through a series of reenacted love scenes, we see the pair's affection for one another. Brokeback Mountain, Titanic and even Sleeping Beauty are depicted. Unfortunately, Rue's feelings are completely muddied by being high on drugs. While Jules is going down on her, Rue fakes an orgasm. Jules knows. Of course she knows. And naturally she heads off and speaks to Elliot about it. Jules starts to doubt herself, so Elliot shows her how it's done by practicing on his hand. Unfortunately, this also leads to the pair kissing until Rue messages and confirms she's outside. Hold up, didn't we learn during the standalone chapter last year that Jules is completely done with men? Well, I guess not. Anyway, Jules is clearly conflicted over her true feelings, breathing heavily while lying on Elliot's bed. And even worse, when Rue goes to the bathroom, the pair end up kissing again. There are so many lies between these three, and the biggest lie of all comes in the form of a 2-inch long line across the sink basin. While Rue continues to do drugs, Elliot meanwhile does not. He actually blows his line away. Meanwhile, the situation between Cassie and Maddie continues to grow ever more volatile. While Nate can keep his feelings buried, his body language says otherwise. Folded arms, standoffish and avoiding Maddie's eye contact, his robotic response to why he loves her speaks volumes. Cassie, however, is far less nonchalant. She painfully smiles through Maddie's birthday, and she's racked with guilt. Cassie's drama stems from Nate's feelings, and specifically how she'll do anything to make sure he and Maddie don't get back together. Cassie essentially blackmails him into a relationship, warning Nate that she's crazier than Maddie, and will happily tell her best friend everything. Even his strained "I love you" doesn't do the trick. At Maddie's party, Maddie speaks to Kat, who's clearly depressed. Kat admits that she hates Ethan and isn't sure what to do. So Maddie tells her she needs to do what she feels is right, and admits she had a feeling things weren't right between them. Speaking of not right, Cal, with a bandaged head, goes out for a drive while drinking. It's reckless, dangerous and bound to end in tears. Drunk, he shows up at the old bar he frequented as a student, reminiscing on the precious moments with Derek from his past. While he puts a song on and dances, an absolutely beautiful montage ensues, with Cal dancing and Cassie losing control, unbeknownst to her that she's being watched while she dances in a bathing suit in the lounge. Speaking of tears, the Rue Elliott Jules situation takes a turn for the worst. After doing drugs earlier on, Rue starts drinking in the car. Now, given she's in rehab and apparently sober, at least in the eyes of everyone around her, then it all goes awry. In fact, Rue tells Jules that he can't stand her in a really heartbreaking moment. The thing is, Rue's problems are about to get a whole lot worse. At home, she starts popping pills from the suitcase. The same suitcase she's supposed to be selling gear from. Back at the party, everyone gets in the hot tub, including Nate and Cassie. Things take an awkward turn when Maddie reveals they're not in a relationship. All the words Maddie taunts him with are unceremoniously interrupted by Cassie, who ends up vomiting in the hot tub. And all over Nate, Maddie, and Kat. Cal is kicked out the bar for trying to wrestle the patrons and eventually gets back in his car, tears stinging his eyes, and heads home. Cal begins urinating all over the floor. With his family watching on, Cal snaps and admits that Marcia is his biggest regret and that as a family, they all have secrets. When the attention turns to Nate, he claims his entire life is a mystery. Interestingly, he has the family portrait under his arm the whole time he's speaking. And with that, he leaves and decides not to return. Meanwhile, Elliot reveals the truth to Jules about Rue. He's had enough of lying and drops the news about how Rue hasn't been sober all this time. And worse, she's taking every drug under the sun. As we jump back to Rue, we dive into her psyche and, specifically, how dangerously close she is to having another overdose. She misses her father, and as the pair subconsciously embrace, it's clear he's the catalyst for Rue's misery and depression. She's taking drugs recklessly to try and be closer to her father, whom she believes is on the other side. With Jules one of the sole reasons she's continuing on, how is that going to play out now that Jules knows? Strap yourselves in, guys. Episode 5 of Euphoria Season 2 starts with a bang, and it continues delivering hard-hitting drama from start to finish. We're at Rue's house and Leslie confronts Rue over taking pills. Rue puts up a big defense and plays it cool. When she finds out Jules is who told her, her entire complexion changes. Rue threatens her mom, blames her for suicidal thoughts and even rasps that she's not a good person. With Gia and Leslie in the former's bedroom, Rue is a woman possessed. She's desperate to find her pills, and between kicking down Gia's door and turning the house inside out, her anger turns to despair when she realizes the pills have been flushed down the toilet. The kaleidoscope of emotion Rue goes through in the scene is nothing short of incredible. And if that wasn't enough, Jules and Elliot happen to be in the living room and have heard everything. Rue turns her anger across to Jules, calling their entire time together a mistake and lashing out in a pretty horrible way. Elliot feels the guilt rise up and eventually leaves, wishing for the old Rue to come back. Rue, meanwhile, breaks down and admits to Leslie she misses her dad, agreeing to go to rehab. En route, though, Rue admits nonchalantly that she relapsed the minute she got out of rehab last time. When a moment of clarity returns to Rue, she suddenly skips out the car and runs away, dodging traffic and ending up at Lexi's house, looking the worse for wear. Her mom is polite enough, but knows instantly she's not doing well. When Rue uses her bathroom, she warns Lexi as much in confidence. Rue immediately begins looking for pills in the cupboard, but when she settles on pawning jewelry instead, she sneaks downstairs and finds Leslie there along with everyone else. Concerned looks on faces abound. When Cassie tries to speak up, Rue deflects and asks her how long she's been screwing Nate. Good grief. Maddie kicks off at Cassie, threatening to get violent. The adults struggle to keep everything together, but when Cassie rushes upstairs and Maddie follows, Rue slips out the front door and tries to find solitude with Fezco. An addict will do anything for a fix, and it doesn't take long for Rue to begin searching through his stash of pills. So naturally, Fezco kicks her out too. Rue eventually resorts to robbing a rich couple in town, snatching up their jewelry and cash. And as she heads out into the streets again, she evades police by hiding in a bin and shows up at Laurie's in an absolute state. She's yawning, clutching her stomach and very clearly addicted. She tries to pay her way using jewelry and stolen cash, but that's not going to cut it. Laurie knows all about addiction, pointing out she used to be addicted to OxyContin and understands what she's going through. Although she acts sympathetic, there's a chilling undercurrent of uneasiness in this entire conversation. When Laurie casually suggests that as a woman, she does have something people wants, it should ring alarm bells. She's implying that Rue take to the street and be a sex worker. Anyway, Laurie takes her to the bath, undresses her and injects the girl with morphine. Rue drifts in and out of consciousness, returning to memories involving her father as a child. Unfortunately, Laurie also locks her in the house, leading Rue to creep through the hallways in the early morning hours and make it out in one piece. If she hadn't got out now, who knows what may have happened to her. As the episode closes out, we cut across to Leslie, at home and worried sick. The door opens and as she calls out for Rue, we fade to Episode 6 of Euphoria Season 2 starts with Rue back home, handling a Jolly Rancher and breathing deeply. She's got withdrawal symptoms, but Leslie is there to help for the time being. At least until a bed is available at the rehab center. Unfortunately, there's a solid week before that happens, meaning Rue is going to have to try and weather the storm back home. While Gia and Leslie both take it in turns to try and be there for her, Rue reflects on the mistakes she's made. Specifically, she hovers over lashing out at Ali, and eventually she rings him to apologize. It's a deep, profuse sorry, and one that sees him forgive her, and even head over with a bag full of groceries later on. In confidence, he encourages Gia to channel her anger, believing it would be good for her. Meanwhile, things are a roller coaster ride of emotion over at Nate's place. With Cal now gone and Nate having won the dick swinging contest, Nate's concerns turn to Maddie. With no messages or calls from her on his phone, he's worried over what she may have planned. Well, according to Maddie, it's murder. The girl on the other end of the phone happens to be Kat, who heads out on a date with Ethan. Well, date may be a bit of a stretch. He's not happy he's had to cancel band practice for this, but shows up all the same. The outcome of their meet sees Ethan and Kat break up, although Kat is pretty nonchalant about the whole thing. Between the Maddie and Cassie drama, Lexi turns to Fezco for comfort. The pair bond well, with the former wondering whether to even continue putting on her play or not. She's stuck right in the middle of this conflict too, eventually calling out Cassie's melodramatic rant. Holding a corkscrew, she bemoans that she doesn't want to live anymore. Cassie's pity-me attitude is something that she likens to Rue, although her mom is quick to dispel that comparison. Rue has had a hard life, Cassie meanwhile, has not. At least not in her eyes anyway. Maddie heads over to her babysitting gig and winds up talking and drinking with Samantha, the woman whose house this belongs to. She admits she's done the same thing to one of her girlfriends, allowing Maddie to see things from a slightly different perspective. Still, it's not going to change her depression, which continues to swell. Over at the Jacobs household, Nate finds himself in a whirlwind of emotion too. That tornado happens to be his mother, who's completely spinning out of control. She discusses how Nate's personality changed and how he darkened when he turned 8 or 9. For Nate though, he realizes he needs to take action, and that comes from stealing Cal's gun and getting back the disc no matter what. After all, if it gets out that Cal is a pedo, that too would reflect badly on Nate and potentially destroy the integrity of the business. With the gun in hand, Nate heads over to Maddie's place, hiding in her room and waiting for her to return. He's not there for an apology though, he wants the disc. After a particularly tense game of Russian roulette, Maddie breaks and admits it's in her purse. It turns out this was all one big bluff, given there were no bullets in the gun to begin with. However, Nate leaves Maddie in a broken mess on the bed, takes the disc and rocks up at Jules' house. He hands it over to her. With this situation resolved, Nate finally rings Cassie back and decides to pick her up. With her mom watching from the living room, Cassie packs up her things and decides to stay at Nate's. Meanwhile, the episode closes at Rue's house. Rue wants to get clean, but Gia's not so sure she'll follow through with this. She's heard it numerous times and by now, it's falling on deaf ears. With the chances slim that she'll succeed, Ali tells them all that Rue needs to find that hope for herself. While Gia and Rue sleep, Leslie learns that Rue isn't going to rehab. Leslie gives a teary confession on the phone, urging them to reconsider and believing Rue is going to kill her. The theater and its double finally sees Lexi's big play come into fruition, which she's been writing in the shadows for this entire season, and seemingly thinking about for much of her teenage life. It proves an interesting, unexpected direction for the penultimate episode of the season, proving to be much more than a pretty highlights reel, featuring a few plot twists, dream sequences, and small character moments here and there. Fiction blends seamlessly with reality in a series of scenes that keep us on our toes, constantly questioning if what we're watching is real, an exaggeration, Lexi's opinion, or all of the above. A few missing pieces prove illuminating, such as the conflict between Maddie and Cassie, showing Maddie's fiery temper slowly fading into sadness and disappointment. There's also a brutally honest moment with Rue and her mother, as the latter explains that Gia needs to be mothered now. Rue has used and abused every ounce of empathy, and there's not enough left for both of them. Lexi's intimate moments with Rue and Maddie show the unexpected depth to their relationship. Surrounded by hard-partying extroverts, Lexi has always struggled to stand out, being more of an observer than a participant. As we see backstage, the sudden rush of power has gone straight to Lexi's head, as she seems oddly comfortable in the role of tyrannical director. But the play proves to be less of a coherent story, and more of a soapbox from which Lexi can blast her opinions about her friends and family to the entire school. She certainly makes no attempts to be subtle. The moment where the cast and characters are revealed to be near-identical matches for their inspirations is hilarious, as the girls realize their dirty laundry is about to be aired in front of the whole school. Of course, Cassie has more reason to fear than most. It proves to be a hell of a show, a high school play with a Broadway budget, highlighting Cassie's daddy issues, the speech outlining her intense dedication to Nate being the stuff that misogynists dream of. Did it really happen, or did Lexi put the words in Cassie's mouth? It's unsettlingly accurate either way. Amusingly, Lexi put a tremendous amount of effort into a homoerotic musical number, created with the sole intention of humiliating Nate, and it works. Keeping up the appearance of being aggressively straight seems to be the way Nate maintains control over his life, just like his daddy, and Lexi shatters that image, humiliating him in a way no other character has really managed to do. Indeed, Nate gets so unsettled by his portrayal that he storms out and blames Cassie, telling her to move her stuff out of his room. Did Lexi just magically resolve Cassie's toxic relationship? Or did she magnify the problem by shining a spotlight on it? While Euphoria often leaves a lot of room for ambiguity, not a bad thing. I'm curious as to what series creator Sam Levinson really thinks about Lexi's gossipy play and how he wants the audience to feel about it. Against Nate, the play feels like a victory. In the eyes of Cassie, it's a devastating humiliation. Maybe Cassie wasn't always the best sister, but did she really deserve this? Lexi's hand-wringing over the morality of her play rings pretty hollow, as she is seemingly seeking validation from Fez rather than seriously questioning her actions. As Fez in his infinite wisdom observes, the level of inspiration a writer can mine from their personal life really depends on the play. Sure, fiction can shine a light on reality, give a little context to chaos, but Lexi is just plucking immensely personal stories and airing them out to the public with no effort to conceal their origin at all. Of course, Fex doesn't get to see the play. His side story with Faye and Ash provides the tension in this episode, as the ever-suspicious Ash seems to smell trouble, while Faye appears morally conflicted. We'll have to wait for the finale to know the fate of Fez, as well as the ending to the play, which seems destined to be disrupted by Cassie, who is ready to erupt in an explosion of fermented hormones and hot tears, which is pretty much what she's done this entire season. The finale is approaching, and Lexi just threw a cluster bomb into a group of unstable melodramatic teens, which seems almost suicidal. Surely, it was more fun to observe from a last episode. What was going on with Fez was the only certainty, the only thing we knew was real and not a production. Thus, that's the first thing that reality overwhelms. Just as Fez is about to leave, Custer confesses about the police having found Mouse's body. Before he can continue, Ash stabs him in the neck with the box cutter he hid up his sleeve, and since the police might be listening through his phone, Fez clamps a hand over his mouth while he messily bleeds out. We frequently cut back and forth between Yer and Lexi. We see the tender getting to know you conversations the two shared over the phone about Little House on the Prairie and the character traits they share. The point is an obvious one. That lovely romance isn't going to get a chance to flourish. Fez isn't going to make it to the play. Perhaps, given how things go, it's just as well. Cassie, having been freshly dumped by Nate, gate crashes the whole thing, and the crowd, not entirely sure whether this is part of the show or not, start booing and jeering pantomime style. Cassie is furious with Lexi for mocking her life. Maddie is furious with Cassie for you know what. Eventually, everyone is on stage brawling. As the fight heads into the stands and then through the halls of the high school, Lexi remains backstage, sobbing. Eventually, Lexi is given a new lease on life. She decides the show must go on, and thanks to some chants of her name started by Rue, but enthusiastically taken up by everyone else, she returns to the stage, thanks everyone for coming, and dedicates the next portion to Fez, who at that moment is trying to take the blame for Custer's death to protect Ash. But Ash won't listen. Instead, he piles all the guns in the bathroom, locks himself inside, and prepares to make his last stand in the bathtub. As the police raid the place, Fez is still banging on the door, imploring Fez to come out and the police not to shoot him. He opens fire through the door and wall, the police shoot back, and Fez, having been clipped by a bullet, screams Ash's name, while bullets shred the house to pieces of plaster and porcelain. Eventually, the shooting dies down. One of the officers opens the bathroom door to find Ash on the floor, seemingly dead, but he sits up and blasts the cop. It's suicide, essentially. A red laser sight tracks up to his head as Fez helplessly watches on. We linger on Fez's face as Ash is shot in the head, and his body thuds lifelessly to the floor. For a moment, Euphoria Season 2, Episode 8 intercuts the police raid with Nate loading a revolver and drinking beer. It looks for a second like he's the one coming for revenge on Fez. But he's out for revenge of a different kind. He turns up at the construction site where Cal is living and hanging out with some scantily clad friends. He explains to them how he found the videos of his dad having sex with hookers when he was only 11, and how since then he has had a recurring dream, the one we saw last week, of Cal having sex with him the same way. Cal is apologetic, obviously. He tried to keep his family and private lives separate, and he failed. He tried to keep Nate safe, and he failed. Nate isn't interested in apologies or excuses. He shows Cal a thumb drive which he claims contains everything, and then lets the cops in to arrest his father. Euphoria Season 2 ending. Amongst all this, the anchor remains, as ever, Rue. We get snippets of her usual narration, and her reaction shots to the various goings-on of the play. Her face when Cassie is heavy breathing through the glass of the auditorium doors is especially brilliant or priceless. She visits Elliot to tell him that she forgives him, and he plays her a highly relevant song that brings tears to her eyes. They're still not good for each other, but maybe they can be friends eventually. She has a stand-in Lexi's play, but from our perspective, she plays herself in all her scenes, including one where she eulogizes her father. Later, Rue congratulates Lexi on the play and goes over to see her, telling her how much it meant to her and how much it helped. Both bond over the loss of their fathers, and they hug and cry, finally able to be best friends again without the buffer of drug addiction and all the pain of loss between them. It's a profound moment of closeness and honesty, and then the camera pulls back and reveals it's a part of Lexi's play. It gets a standing ovation. Jules tells Rue that she misses and loves her, and Rue kisses her on the head before she leaves the auditorium. She walks home alone as her voiceover tells us that she stayed clean for the rest of the school year, mostly because it was easier than relapsing. As Ollie's words echo in her head, she explains how the thought of eventually one day being a good person is reason enough to keep trying. Maybe there's something in that, she speculates. Maybe she's right. Do you have any thoughts on Euphoria Season 2's ending? Let us know in the comments box. This is end of Season 2. And let's hope for Season 3 early to drop.